Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Air Holler with me, here 37. So in our last flight, we flew from St. Martin over to Puebla in our DHL 747. Like I said, there was a returning flight from Puebla back to St. Martin, and St. Martin is a really cool place, especially for the landings. So I said we'd go ahead and do that one. So that's what we got for today. Got it already loaded. Now, it's really using a lot less fuel. It's actually over 2,000 miles, but I put it in for 1887 because in the last flight, we should have had like 600 left if it had done at the rate that we think it is. And it was actually like almost like 1,100, 1,200, so I went ahead and just put just a little bit of fuel in it. Day flight, and let's go ahead and move on over to the plane. Alright everybody, here we are at the plane. It's starting to start up. They put us at a really awkward angle, didn't they? So we're going to be taking off runway 17, just like we came in. Alright, this thing won't completely start up normal, so we'll have to fix a few things in just a second. But we'll get started on this. Alright, our route is MMPB and TNCM. Put that in the route. Activate and execute. Departures and arrivals. We're going to take off on runway 17, and the SID is going to be Mapping 2. And let's do our arrival. We're going to be landing on runway 10. Uluba 1. There's actually more stars than that. It's supposed to, at least. Alright. So let's go ahead, find these discontinuities, get these out of here. There's actually coming in here, it seemed like such a longer flight than it should have been. It's actually a really long flight. Alright. Will it not let that? Why won't it let that one come up? Avaki, it won't look up with Lessor. Mapon. That's kind of odd. Kind of worried about that a little bit. Go ahead and execute. We'll check this out in just a second. Let's turn the range up a little bit. Open up plan. We'll step through this. It's kind of odd, that star. Alright, so juice to Uluba. And it did take out that one, but that's alright. There's the... Alright, so that'll work. Let's go up here. We need to turn on yaw dampers, hit that fan, trim air, window heat. I think that's all we have to turn on. Turn on the beacon and the nav as well, since we're start up. Is the APU? Turn the APU off. Go to the APU bleed. Let's go down here again. I need to go put in the cargo and the fuel, so be right back. Alright, the fuel's in. Reserve fuel weight. Put 5 in reserves. Cost index, let's go a little bit higher. Let's go to 80. And cruising altitude, we'll go to 35,000 feet. Thrust on this, we don't need it ready to take off. Flaps to 10. Alright, trim is 5. Move that up just a little bit. 162 is our V2 speed. Let's check as well our approach speeds. Alright, runway 10, 155, 155. Obviously can't have me at 240. 2 miles to get down. Let's go 175. 966. Come on. 175. Is there something here that's doing it? What if I put it at 1,000 feet? I'm not sure why it... I mean, we can't come in at 240 like that. There we go. 175. And 10 miles in front of that, we can go to 210. Although we might be at manual throttles by this time anyway. We'll put that at 2,600. And that should be fine. So part of that star did get cut off. I don't know why. It was kind of weird. Alright. Shift P. Let's get our pushback started. Radio for minimums. Brakes and RTO. Release to auto. I'll go ahead and turn on TCAS. Turn on the flight director. Right, flight director. Put this up to 35,000. I think we're just going to push straight back. I don't think we can't angle it at all. I've got the commercial aviation set to 100%, general to 50, but there's like nobody here. It's just not a popular place. I thought, like I said, coming in, I thought it was a fairly big area, but apparently not. 174 for the runway heading. All right. Still go back a little ways. Oh, hell. We're in the grass. Alright. It's not big enough airport for its 747. I thought we could go back further. I thought it was a little deeper. Apparently not. Taxi lights on. Put the flaps to 10. Glad we don't get stuck in the grass. Technically we should. Plus it's wet. It would make it even worse. Alright. I can't tell. I can't tell if there's another taxiway down there or not. I don't really see one, so we're gonna have to cut over here. Yeah, I think this is the last one on this side. I hope there's a turnaround area up here. There's gotta be. Well, I guess it doesn't have to be, but we need one. There was at the other end. Which that doesn't really help now, does it? There might be one on the right side. There's not one on the left side. Alright, so we'll go ahead and stop right here since we're slowed down. There's nobody coming here. Can't tell from there. Landing lights, strobe. We'll enter the runway. You could almost take off from right here. You probably could take off from right here. But we won't. I don't see any turnaround spot. Maybe there is one on the left, actually. We shall see. It just feels desolate out here. But it's weird because we're like 7,300 feet altitude. It's kind of crazy. Alright, there's a turnaround area to the right. So that works. You can hear that AccuFuel. I believe that's added. I'm not sure if that's from the PMDG or you can hear that little thud. I know it's got some different sounds since I put AccuFuel in here, which I do like. I've used it before for a little while. Then it started giving me problems, so I just took it out and never put it back in. But I installed it again. I do like some of the features, especially with the smaller aircraft. It does give you some really nice stuff for the small aircraft, the general aviation type. Turn around. Give it some more thrust. We're going so slow. Alright. Let's get lined up again. Got off the thrust a little too much. Alright. That squeak is definitely from AccuFuel. Or AccuFuel. Auto thrust arm. LNAV and VNAV. Alright, so let's go for it. Toga. On our way to St. Martin. We're over 2,000 miles away. Up a little bit to the right. Maybe we could take off from that taxiway.
V1. Rotate. V2.
Alright. Positive rate, gear up. Straight up and out of here. Watch the speed. Go ahead and hit the autopilot. Turn the gear off. You can go ahead and turn the taxi light off as well. We're already at 8,700 feet. Speed's climbing. Take a look outside real quick. There really is nothing out here. Which is kind of surprising. Like I say, I thought I've heard of Puebla before many a times, but there's just like nothing out here, which is odd. Just desolate. Alright, we need to get the flaps to 5. I think I need to get some of the sound files back in for the 747 as well. Alright, flaps are at 1, crossing 10,000 feet, so we'll go ahead and turn the landing lights off. What the heck? Get up in the clouds now. There's some humanity over here. We're going to be up in the clouds, so we can't really see it. Though I guess not that much. Alright, well, we get the flaps up all the way. So it's a long flight for me, so we put that to 160 in range. So I'm going to go ahead and speed it up, and we'll be back in just a little bit. Alright everybody, I'm back. We just crossed 7,000 feet. As you can see, it's gotten dark on us. I didn't really think about that coming back east. The amount of time it would take, plus it's how many time zones away. At least 4 hours difference. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone land at St. Maarten towards the nighttime. We're gonna try it. So see, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the auto throttles off. We need to be down near 150. And our landing speed is 143. As you can see, we're not that far away from the airport. Alright, flaps to 5. It's just coming in too fast. Alright, now I can release that. Alright, arm the spoilers. Auto brakes are at 2. I'm going to go ahead and slow this down to normal speed. Alright, give it a little bit of thrust. Flaps to 10. A little more than I wanted to there. I'm going to change the range again. It's kind of hard to see some of these buttons actually. Alright, the runway heading 096. Turn that to 096. Alright, a little more thrust. Now we're getting a little slow. Flaps to 20.
2,500.
I guess we got 10, 12, about 14 miles to the runway. Can't see it at all. Might be over there. That does have happy lights. I think that's it right over here. It might be a little more to the left, but it looks like there's some light over here. Get myself, we're not going to turn anymore, so I can go ahead and line this up right to where I want it. Yeah, that's got to be the area right over there. Actually, is it right here? Like that little ding-in from the FMC is quite annoying. It can't be. It looks like that's it right there, but it seems like that's so far in front of the mountains. It says we're too. Man, shut up, FMC, Jesus. Gears coming down, I forgot that happens for some reason around here, that happens. Takes you right off course. I don't know why that happens at all. Where'd it go? Alright, full flaps. That got me all screwed up. It doesn't make any sense because why it turns like that when it turns off. Alright, it looks like we're a little high now. Get off the thrust. Nose down a little bit. Or that was a bunch of BS though. My goodness. We're still not where we want to be. Off the thrust a little more. We need to get down. That sucks because now it's going to be a little harder to set the thrust point. Alright, we're coming back up on the glide slope now.
1,000.
Back on the thrust. Wanted to get nose up. Alright, here we go. We're a little slow and a little high.
500.
Come on, girl, get down a little bit for me.
400.
She's really fighting me trying to get my nose down. See, we're high again.
300. 200.
This is going to be a horrible landing.
Sink rate. 100. Approaching minimum rate. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Guess it ended up being not too bad. It's definitely not how you want to come in, diving at the ground like that. My goodness.
80 knots.
Yeah, that autopilot turning it like that just totally screwed everything up. I don't know if I can make this taxiway or not. I'll go around. Oh man, that was a little intense there, diving at the ground like that. And I just couldn't get my nose down. I couldn't decrease the altitude at least. As I was trying to catch up and get down, it was like it wouldn't let me. It just stayed a little high. Come on. I think we're going to end up in the grass a little bit. We could have actually made that taxiway. I should have just taken it. That's alright. I was thinking that could be a little small, but heck, it looks like that's one we take anyway, actually. We should have just taken it in the first place. Wonder what our frame rate is. 21. Probably comes up a little bit, though. That is not the taxiway. Hell. Glad I realized that the last second. That is like over to the fire area or something. Yeah, this is it. Although you'd figure frame rate would be a little low just because of the lights and all that. But actually, it's not too bad. Not sure how to park exactly where we did in the last one. We might just go over to the gate. Shall see. Literally, I think it just had us like parked over to the side, wasn't it? I'm not sure if there's a particular gate. If I remember correctly, it was like one in the middle. I guess we'll go around this lamp post. Doesn't really matter, there's no one else there. I don't see any taxi lines here. I think there's actually one right here, actually. I'll go, I guess not. I can't see any lines. So we'll just kind of go over here to the middle. Alright. Oh, no, not too bad. There's another long trip, though. Oh, you know what? We forgot the landing lights and the strobe. Ugh. Alright, parking brake. Need to turn that taxi light off as well. I can't really see it. You can see how much the camera moves. 30 flights. Turn all those off. Whoa. Whoa. There's the logo. I don't know where the battery is. There we go. Alright, everything's off. Let's go ahead and move on over to air hauler and we'll get paid. Alright. Back here in air hauler, we'll go ahead and unload it. Get paid. I'm thinking we've made like 1.8 million on these 2 flights, which is really nice. I mean, that's always good money, especially when you did so much damage to that other plane. I thought we didn't really do the damage. The game did the damage. Shoved me down to the ground. Alright, air hauler, come on. There we go. I go to finance real quick. Cash book. Well, let's go to bank loans. Take out a loan. Cancel. Monthly overhead, $5 million. Company is worth over $2 billion. Cash, $234 million. Alright, so we made 738 plus that. Yeah, not quite 1.8 million. And not a whole lot in fuel either. Let's actually check the fuel on that. How far can that DHL go? Probably doesn't say, does it? 64,000. So it's got so much more than it needed. Just didn't use a whole lot. So, got the DHL. That's done. Air France is done. DHL is done. Emirates Sky Cargo. KHSV. I cannot remember for the life of me where that is. It sounds very familiar. Check out where it is real quick so we can see where we're going. Alright. 747 Emirates Sky Cargo right there. May have to have them move it either to Memphis or Atlanta. Let's see what's going on. Well, let's see what's going on in Atlanta. $562 up to San Fran. Oh, wow. I mean, we got to do that. 700 grand for 200 miles? Yeah. I'll do that all the time. So that's, I'll have Emma. That's who actually flies that. Emma, take that to Atlanta. Alright, well, so that'll probably be the next flight. Atlanta to Memphis, a really short flight. Which is kind of nice. Those last two have been seem like extremely long. Takes well over 2 hours for each of them to actually do. But that's going to be it for this episode, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'll catch you guys on the next flight.
Sink rate.